Hello everyone, welcome. My name is MJ Petridge. Welcome to another P3D video. Today I want to talk about frame rate, FPS, in P3D version, current version 5, and your monitor, your refresh rate, and how you can get the smoothest frames. Dispel a few myths and also maybe light a path for people who don't know or maybe lost in the darkness. So if you're having trouble having a frame rate and getting a smooth fluid without stutters, maybe watch this video and find out maybe you're doing something that's not working and you could try something else. Now, a disclaimer in this video, everything I say in this video is my own personal opinion, and it's all based on fact and not fiction, you know. I'm not making anything up, you know, but it is my opinion of what I believe. So it's not guesswork is what I'm saying, okay? So in P3D flight simulation, you know, and I mean ever since the days of FSX really, FPS, you know, the frame rate per second is a big factor for flight simmers, you know. Everyone's always talking about FPS. Oh, what's your FPS, mate? You know, and, you know, people on the outside looking in, you know, which I kind of include gamers, they're always like, bunch of nerds jizzing over their frame rates, you know. Hey guys, I got 60 FPS. And like I don't know, it's just really funny. I find looking into our hobby, which we concentrate so much on certain elements of it, you know, because it's very important. And the reason it's very important is because it really determines the immersion factor that you have. Like, we all do flight simulation because we want to replicate flying a plane, you know, and part of that process is controlling the plane with hardware, you know, having a yoke, having a steering thing, being able to do that fluidly without lag is a major factor, you know, in our immersion. And that's just talking about like the controllers, you know. Then you got the visuals, you know, wanting it to look real, you know, wanting it to look accurate. But it's more about, I think it's more about the planes and the processes that you have to do, like your checklists and what a pilot does go through in any one given flight to achieve that immersion level, you know. And everyone's got their own set level of what they want to use flight simulation for. Some want to actually learn it for training purposes. Some just want to have fun. Some just want to use it to make YouTube videos, you know. Some just like see it as a relaxing hobby to learn, or like, you know, I want to learn a 737, the current 737. I want to learn how to fly that. That's a challenge for some people, you know, and they want to meet that challenge. So whatever reason you're using flight simulation, and I'm talking, I suppose, about all flight simulators, really. Although Microsoft does have a star next to it when I say all simulators. It doesn't matter, you know, what you're using it for. We're all in the same boat. We all have a monitor that needs to display our flight sim. We all have a PC that needs to, you know, power the flight sim. And then most of us use different types of controllers that need to be, you know, in USB'd into the PC to do this flight sim. So we're all kind of governed by the frame rate. So, okay, so let's get into it really. First off, like what is important in getting smooth frame rates, you know? Like, what is a frame rate? You know, and I'm sorry, I'm going to start a little bit basic here, but frame rate, okay, is a single frame, a static picture, you know, with a display, whatever is in it, you know? So in our case, it's the flight simulator, and that is made up, you know, one single frame is made up of quite a few complex things. You've got your cockpit, you know, your plane. You've got the atmospherics, the world around your plane, you know, the clouds, the sky colors, lightning, weather, rain, the moon, the sun, you know, and then moving down, you've got the landscape, you know, you've got vector data inserted in, you've got navigational data, you know, put in there. It's like however the sim determines the weather in any given one spot, and obviously Microsoft do it very differently to P3D, and X-Plane is exploring a new way as well. How is all that handled, you know, in that single one frame? You know, you've got all your sim objects, you know, all your assets that are pumped in, that are independent of the sim, that are add-ons, that are additional pieces of information in that single frame. There's so much going on in a single frame. It's mental. And, you know, we want smooth movement. We want smooth immersion, because there is one big snake in the grass here, that if you get lag, if you get stutters in your sim, it's not just your visuals where you're going to see and notice this. It's your hardware, because the reason stutters exist is because the hardware cannot keep up with what is being asked of it. And that's basically it. You know, that is what it boils down to at its simplest form. Your PC cannot perform what you're asking it to do, and so you're going to get stutters or screen tearing, you know. But the stutters are important because it's also... And if your CPU is being throttled, like if you've overclocked it, you know, and its usage is like maxed out to 100, it can begin to actually sweat too much and actually then stop the flow of data around the PC, in terms of it hasn't got any more usage to handle basic data movement, you know. And so the data moving from your sim, or from your controller, sorry, to your sim, it stops. And so far, and then suddenly you're on your joystick or you're on your yoke, and you're like, dude, I'm moving it, but it's not responding. Oh, what's happened? Well, this is lag, you see. So if your refresh rate, you know, is too low, or if it pauses or stutters, then that lag is introduced into the controller as well, and that means you're going to overcompensate or whatever. I mean, I have done videos on this topic before, but I feel it's necessary to update it, because there's a giant elephant in the room that too many people are getting suckered into. Okay, and again, I'm talking about flight simulation, really, because it's not needed, really, and I'll get to that in a second. So FPS, yeah, frame rate, is one single frame, okay, and if you have 24 of them put together, you've got 1 second of video, you know, 1 second of animated frame, you know, and so if you have a steady frame rate, you'll have fluid movement in your sim, you know. Controllers, like, they need frame rates in order to function. They need frame rate. If there's no frame rate in the sim, your controller is kind of like, there's no data transmitting. Okay, so like if the FPS is 1, then your controller ain't going to work. It's going to lock, basically, and you're going to be wiggling your joystick and nothing's happening in the sim, you know, because your display just can't show you anything if you're at 1 FPS, you know. So the refresh rate is very much tied to your monitor and your GPU, okay? Your monitor, your GPU kind of will determine what your refresh rate is, and then in the sim, what is acceptable for your controllers to work at, okay? So, and again, I am talking about like frame rate in general, but one thing you've got to understand is gaming is very different to flight simulation. Okay, and this is where that star with Microsoft comes from, because at the moment, currently, and again, people would argue with this with me, Microsoft Flight Simulator is more of a game than it is a flight simulator. Okay, it's called Microsoft Flight Simulator, but it is more of a game in terms of how it's being made and like the refresh rates that are needed for that, or acceptable for that, you know. You can achieve a very much higher frame rate in Microsoft Flight Sim than you can in any other sim. The one reason being is because it's a recent, you know, development, so it's taking consideration and advantage of recent optimizations in the hardware, but also is that it's very much locked in terms of the add-ons that are put in are very much in tune with the sim. You know, they're all recently being made from the development kit, and honestly, it is probably more optimized than any other sim in terms of what refresh rate it can give. I mean, potatoes can run 60 FPS in Microsoft. You can't have that in P3D, and probably not in X-Plane. And that's mainly because it's a recent development game, and it is a game. It doesn't have a lot of the complexity under the hood that P3D or X-Plane has, which kind of needs calculations of the CPU to do, which will take away from your frame rate, or lower your ability to achieve a frame rate. You know, I mean, one day the Microsoft Flight Simulator will catch up with the others in terms of under the hood, and become more of a flight simulator. But at the moment, it is more of a game. It is more like GTA 5 than it is P3D. Okay. Under the hood of a flight simulator like P3D or X-Plane, or even maybe DCS World, you know, a lot is going on, and your CPU works hard in flight simulation. You know, you can optimize it to get the best from it. And I've done videos on that, and I'll link them down below. Most likely, your CPU and your GPU, though, if you're using default power profiles in Windows, isn't optimized to get the most from it. It's just sort of getting an average from it. You can actually get more power from that. And again, links are down below. But they're very much governed. The P3D sim, which I'm just going to hone in now on P3D, is very much governed by what hardware you have. You know, CPU, GPU, and RAM. The fluidity of your frame rate in your sim is directly linked to your hardware in your PC. If you have a potato, your frame rate is going to be struggling to maintain, okay? If you've got NASA's PC, which pretty much I'm very close to, you can achieve frame rates of whatever you want. But it doesn't mean you should. Just because my PC can achieve, you know, 250 FPS, should I be running my sim at 250 FPS? We'll get into that in a second, okay? Now, one of the biggest problems for people searching on the internet for information or not knowing fully what something does is that companies can take advantage of them, right? And I'm talking about G-Sync, okay? G-Sync is the biggest con in computing history, okay? I'm just going to read what it says here. Now, this is from the Nvidia developing website themselves, okay? So, seeing is believing. You're absolutely right, Nvidia. And I'm not having a go, Nvidia, but here we go. Nvda G-Sync is groundbreaking new display technology that delivers the smoothest and fastest gaming experience ever. G-Sync's revolutionary performance is achieved by synchronizing display refresh rates to the GPU in your GeForce GTX-powered PC, eliminating screen tearing and minimizing display stutter and input lag. The result? Scenes appear instantly, objects look sharper, and gameplay is super smooth, giving you a stunning visual experience and a serious competitive edge. Now, this is all true, and at the same time is a load of bollocks, okay? Because it's a massive sales technique, right? G-Sync does not need to exist for starters, okay? Monitors, even if you've got the oldest monitor in history, okay, will either be a 50 hertz monitor or a 60 hertz monitor, full stop, okay? Now, there are a lot of recent monitors that can actually achieve a 30 hertz setting. And of course, there are monitors that can achieve 144 hertz, you know, 240 hertz. But let's just have a look at these monitors, shall we? This one particular monitor on Amazon here is a G-Sync compatible adaptive sync monitor. You can get 240 esports monitor hertz with it, right? And it's 480 quid, right? You're paying for the G-Sync feature on this monitor, okay? It's a 1080p monitor, okay? And it has, if we scroll down here, color settings, you know, brightness and all that jazz, like a normal monitor does. But you're paying for the G-Sync because it's 480 quid. Let's have a look at the same type of monitor, 27-inch, 1080p monitor, but let's just take out that G-Sync. It's now £160. And guess what? 1 millisecond of response time. Guys, do you need any faster than 1 millisecond? I mean, did this say 1 millisecond? I don't think it did. Probably can't achieve it. But this one, 75 hertz, will definitely support 60 hertz, which, to be honest, in P3D is the highest your flight sim should ever be running at. If you're running your flight sim at 120 FPS plus, then you're asking your GPU to do twice the work for less beneficial gain in your sim visually. You know, yeah, people are going to argue with me now. Well, I can feel the difference with my G-Sync monitor, my 144 hertz. I can feel a difference in the controllers compared to 30 or 60 hertz. And I'm going to say you're correct, okay? But I'm also going to say you're buying into and sucking on the biggest wool covering over the eyes in human history, okay? Because you're asking your GPU to work twice as hard and you're getting less visual gain. Okay, yeah, the control response might be smoother, but beyond 30 FPS, the control system does not need any more. Like, there are two ways to control your sim in P3D. Well, I suppose you could say there's three ways, but there's two ways: chase plane and default. That's it. Easy dock system is gone, bye-bye. That's no longer a thing. It's either chase plane or you use the default. Now, in either of those, you can use the mouse to move the camera around, or you can use a hat switch to move your camera around, or you can use kind of like default setup views and then just flick between them using your keypad. Whichever way you use it, like, your mouse is probably faster. But there is a certain minimum requirement to keep the screen from tearing, and that is 30 FPS, by the way. There is no visual difference between 30 and 60 in terms of moving it around. If you whip it fast, then yes, there is. Okay? But we're not playing Call of Duty. We're in a cockpit. We're just looking. We're not suddenly needing to get whiplash to turn around to look at something. Okay? So you really don't need to be running anything higher than 60 FPS. So you've got a choice. You can run your sim at 120 hertz or 144 hertz, which equals to 120 FPS or 144 FPS, which means your scenery settings on your GPU are going to have to come down because your GPU is locked to the amount of frame rate it can give you, right? It can only give you so much based on what it can do, you know, and that's based in tied with your CPU, your RAM, and the operating system as well, and what you're throwing into your sim. The more you put in your sim, the more it has to sweat, so the less frame rate you get. So it's up to you. You can either have half the scenery at double the FPS rate, or you can have double the scenery and still achieve a smooth, fluid visual sim. Okay, unless you're doing, you know, a Luke Skywalker run through the canyon at 200 plus miles an hour, which, to be honest, your scenery probably won't even load at that speed, then you're not going to see the difference sitting in a cockpit where the camera's kind of moving a little bit slowly, where even probably 15 FPS would do you, right? Trust me, you're just putting a strain on your system. Now, again, we've seen like one monitor price here. Let's look at another one, shall we? Samsung, okay, 27 inches again, 240 hertz, 240 quid. Right, well, that's a little bit better, to be honest, than the 480. But again, let's look at the same type of monitor, because this one's G-Sync compatible. We'll take out the G-Sync, and it's now down to 183 quid. Now, this type of monitor is absolutely presentable for flight simulation. It's 1080p, you know. I don't actually rate 4K in flight simulation in P3D. Like, you can have it, but it's a ball ache. And visual detail, minor. 1080p is absolutely fine. The response time's 5 milliseconds. Man, that is actually quite fast. That's less than a second. Milliseconds, yeah? And it's most likely going to support 60 hertz at 70. If it can do 75, it can do 60, right? Now, this is the way I have my setup done, okay? Because for anybody who doesn't know, but your monitor has a refresh rate, okay? And what this means is every, you know how we talked about a single frame and what it contains, you know, is one frame, okay? And it has to change that frame out to give you movement, you know? So obviously the more frames, the smoother the movement. But beyond 24 frames per second, your eyeballs don't perceive anything smoother, okay? Regardless of what people will tell you in terms of their sales bullshit, right? As fluid movement, because human eyesight doesn't go beyond 23 FPS anyway. I mean, we don't perceive the world in frames, don't get me wrong here, but your eyesight cannot perceive a visual difference between 24 and 30, okay? They'll both look the same. So setting it at 30 FPS or, you know, anything like that is absolutely acceptable. So the way I have my setup here is my refresh rate. Look, my monitor can support right down to 24, and even the lowest, which is 23. I could set any one of them to. My monitor also supports 30 hertz. Now, I try and run my P3D flight sim at 30 FPS. So I set up my system here at 60 hertz. Why? Basically because I play video games as well as flight sim. So video games are very much different to flight simulation, like I said before. So I would say in a video game, 60 FPS is more essential than 30 FPS, especially if you're using your mouse as a camera where it can whip faster and you need that frame rate in order to see detail. And also with the more effects that are coming in to the technologies being used, then these particle systems really only get perceived at high FPS rates. And that is why companies like Nvidia want you to be able to achieve like 120 plus FPS, because you're going to be able to see these little particle details, which, to be honest, you probably wouldn't care about, but kind of also go towards the realism of the game. None of this exists in P3D, by the way, right? So you'd have no benefit at running your monitor at 144 hertz. And this refresh rate is exactly what we were talking about in terms of your frame rate, your FPS, because each frame, you know, refreshed equals to your frame rate. So in other words, in my sim, if my monitor is locked to 60 hertz, my sim must achieve 60 FPS, otherwise I'll get screen tearing, right? So in the back end of my sim, what I tend to do is choose the half frame rate option and let the GPU lock my frame rate to 30, and you know, all's good. Now at the end of the day, it's not actually that true in the sim. Now if we go and we look at P3D in my program settings here, you'll see that I don't actually set it up that way. So it's actually turned off the vertical sync, and I lock my max frame rate to 40, because beyond 40 is just mental, right? But what my GPU does is it tries to lock to 40 every single time. Now, the GPU can lock your frame rate better than the CPU can, and the CPU is where it used to happen in the past. The GPU does it better these days, and it's able to do it now in the sim. So use your GPU to lock your frame rate. You'll find that you can actually match that and maintain it much easier than you can if you turn this off here and then in the sim set it there. If you set it in the sim, you're asking your CPU to do it. If you set it here, you're asking your GPU to do it. GPUs can do it better. Okay. If you if I was to turn vertical sync on, then P3D, or my GPU, sorry, is now trying to match P3D to 60 FPS, which probably will struggle with like PMDG plane loaded in with True Earth and all the other stuff that I'm loading in as well. It's probably going to really struggle to render all that at 60 frames. So I ask it to do it at 40. Now it will, the way the sim is set up now in P3D is it will always achieve the highest it can. No matter what setting you do put it at, it will always strive to get the highest. So it'll basically go to its maximum, and then the rest of your PC goes towards rendering and loading and calculating the rest of the sim. Although if you're asking your sim to go to 144, how much of that power is left over for navigational data, vector data, loading and rendering? Like, how much of that is left over? If it's not enough is left over, well, this is where you're going to get problems in your sim in terms of things not working correctly. Now, before I go waffling on, I'm just basically what I'm saying here, right? Basically what I'm saying here is, and again, I'm not attacking Nvidia, and by the way, G-Sync and FreeSync are exactly the same thing. So FreeSync is AMD's answer to G-Sync, okay? All it is, though, I mean, look at this here. This dude here, he's watching his bank balance just go down because he's buying G-Sync monitors. I mean, this is Nvidia, so you already count on GeForce technology for the smoothest, highest quality and the most intense gameplay. Why settle for anything less when it comes to your gaming display? The first rule of sales, by the way, is you don't sell your product, okay?
Show them how it's done. Boom. Sell me that pen. Watch. Go on.
Let me show this fucking pen.
That's my boy right there.
This pen.
Fucking sell anything.
Why don't you do me a favor? Why don't you name down that napkin for me?
I don't have a pen.
Exactly. Supply and demand, my friend.
Holy shit.
You give your customers problems that your product solves. That's how you sell products. So Nvidia is trying to tell you that, you know, you're going to get stutters in your game and you're going to get the edge in competitive games if you have G-Sync, right? Because if you don't have it, you're going to have problems. And so the answer to your problems is G-Sync. And that's how they're trying to sell this big con, right? But just think about what this thing said here. Let's break this down first, okay? Because a lot of people have G-Sync displays, right, that they've purchased, and it's cost them quite a lot of money. And at the end of the day, you don't need to have spent that, okay? Because a 60 hertz monitor will do, you know, which is half the price. So this is why this video exists, really, is to kind of help people like not waste their money by having the wool pulled over their eyes by the biggest con in computing history. So Nvda G-Sync is a groundbreaking new display technology. Groundbreaking new display technology that delivers the smoothest and fastest gaming experience ever. So the revolutionary performance is achieved by synchronizing display refresh rates to your GPU, which you can do yourself in the panel that I just showed you, okay? You don't need to get a middleman to come in to do that for you because you can do it yourself. Now, you might say, well, actually, no, I need that. I need G-Sync, to be honest. I need the G-Sync monitor because it's the middle thing that's going to help my PC achieve it. Well, you've just answered your own question there. Getting a G-Sync monitor does not suddenly mean you're going to get high frame rates because it's a fast response monitor and it's a fast gaming monitor, and it's even advertised, you know, this, you know, it's even advertised as like, you know, this will give you the edge competitively and make your experience more smooth. No, it won't. It has the ability to do this, but everything on your PC that you connect to it is governed by the hardware you're connecting it to. If you have a potato to begin with, it ain't suddenly going to turn into gold because you've got a G-Sync monitor, okay? If your GPU, your RAM, and your CPU collectively working together cannot display 144 FPS in P3D, you know, with the add-ons you're using, it doesn't matter what mystical bullshit that Nvidia is trying to sell you. If your hardware doesn't support it, just forget it. Even NSYNC's not even going to, you know, make a difference. You could be singing till, you know, you die, and it ain't going to make a difference. P3D and any flight simulator is governed by the hardware. So we're locked into what we can achieve with our hardware. Yeah, we can tweak the software a little bit. We can, in the CFG file, we can do this, we can do that to get a bit more performance out. But at the end of the day, we're still locked into that tunnel of performance, you know, and your monitor is included in that as well. So getting a G-Sync monitor basically is bullshitting your GPU, is basically what this statement is saying. You know, it's bullshitting your GPU and meeting it in the middle so you can have a smooth experience by making the GPU actually work twice as hard. Because, you know, let's face it, we all want the settings in our sim to be on maximum, don't we? We all want the settings in the sim to be on ultra, you know, because it looks good, and we all want our game to look the best. Now in P3D, that takes a beefy PC to do. You know, if you want to see all your sliders put to ultra, you've got to have a good PC, you know. Otherwise you're going to get 1 to 2 FPS if all your sliders are to the left, or to the right, sorry. If all your sliders are to the right, you're going to get like between 1 to 2 FPS if your PC isn't up to it. So get a better PC, you know. Getting a G-Sync monitor is not going to help. So, okay, I kind of feel like this is almost becoming an attack on Nvidia now. So I just want to say that, you know, the G-Sync side of things is a unnecessary addition of a performance hit to your GPU. Okay, let's just say I'm flying over India, right? I've got my settings at a particular amount and my frame rate is achieving 30 FPS, okay? Now, it's achieving 30 FPS because I want it to achieve 30 FPS. If I want it to achieve 60 FPS, something's got to give. My sliders suddenly have to come down, and I'm losing visual detail now in my sim. Whoa, like half of the trees are gone, half of the buildings are gone, because my PC can't load that into my sim, because I'm asking it, well, give me more FPS, you know, but something's got to give. So you can either, you're stumped with a question here. You can either have, you know, 30 FPS in your sim, or you can have 60 FPS in your sim. You do not need G-Sync to make you think you need more, okay? Because the controller aspect doesn't get any better after 60 FPS, okay? Your camera ain't gonna suddenly magically whip faster. So as you can see here, I'm moving my mouse around, okay, the camera system, sorry, using my mouse, and in my sim it's 30 FPS. Now, if I was to do this at 60 FPS, it would look smoother, yes, okay? If I use my hat switch, there is no difference between 30 and 60 FPS. It doesn't get smoother, because the hat switch doesn't respond faster above 30 anyway, so you're not going to see the benefit, right? It doesn't go faster, you know. There's only a certain amount of response out of my hat switch. The mouse will move faster because my hand moves faster. So therefore, 60 FPS is more beneficial, yes. But that means I've got to have my sliders down lower to make up the difference. So for me, I have a 30 FPS, maybe 40 FPS achievement level, meaning I can actually get a lot more scenery detail in, you know. So people with a G-Sync monitor, they're asking their GPU now to actually hit up to 144 FPS. Wow, how much detail are you going to have to remove now to achieve that? Well, hey, you've got it, mate. Well done. 144. All your settings are on low, though. I'd rather have scenery detail than a very high frame rate and brag about it. Like, you don't even need 60 FPS. You don't even need in P3D. Again, not talking about gaming. So anyway, how do we achieve this is the moral of the story here. Well, it's very simple. In your NVIDIA control panel, like I said before, if you set your frame rate in P3D, if you lock it, it will try and achieve that amount. If you put vertical sync on, it will achieve it to your set refresh rate, 60. So if I was to put VSync on, then my GPU is going to try and achieve P3D to 60 FPS. And if it can achieve that, stutters, right? I'll see visual stutters. If I turn it off and I lock it to 40, now 40 is not 60. So there is a difference already of 20 frames, you know, and it knows this. And so even at 40 FPS, it's smooth for me, because the GTX, you know, driver card knows that my monitor is actually set to 60, but I just need 40 in the game, and that's going to be smooth enough for me. So P3D tries to get up to 40, and then after that it goes, never mind, we'll put the rest of the GPU towards rendering something else or doing another task. And so all the performance goes to that then. If I was to unlock my frame rate, my GPU, if I was to unlock it to unlimited, man, my FPS might go up to like 60 to 80, you know? I might have a very high refresh rate. But then suddenly, like, it's more concentrating on that, and now stuff ain't loading in, or stuff ain't rendering in as fast, you know? So set it to off vertical sync if you can't achieve your 60 FPS in the sim. If you can achieve it, way hey. But guess what? If you're flying over Russia or the Sahara Desert, where there's absolutely no houses or trees, right, over the Sahara Desert, and then you go to somewhere like Alaska or Canada or even New York, where there's hundreds of buildings, hundreds of trees, man, that's a big difference there, isn't it, of what's loading into your sim. So you're going to get great frame rates in the desert because you're not loading anything more into your sim beyond sand, right? And it's not loading grain by grain. So versus going to New York, loading in loads of trees and buildings, suddenly your frame rate will drop down. So what you want to do is you want to set your frame rate to achieve the same frame rate number in all weathers and in every location in the world. The way you do it, okay, is this. Find out what your monitor's native resolution is, okay? Mine actually says it's this here, 38402160. So actually, I should be setting it to that. And I have the same options as if I set it lower to that. It makes no difference, right? I didn't make a change, so cancel that. Now, the thing is, if I do set to my native, my 1080 Ti has, in P3D, has a little bit more trouble displaying 4K textures as opposed to 2K textures. It actually is better performing on the 2K texture side. So I natively set my monitor to 2K, 60 Hertz, and in the back end here, I set it to 40 FPS, and it'll just try and achieve 40. And no matter what I'm flying, that is actually high enough frame rate. The rest of the GPU goes towards the rendering of the world, which puts in all the trees, the buildings, and everything else that shows up. Beautiful, okay? And then in the simulator, as you can see, I turn it to unlimited frame. So I'm telling my sim, try and achieve the highest frame rate you can, right? My GPU's going, but only go up to 40. So as soon as that hits, done. Turn off VSync though, so my CPU isn't trying to calculate this. It's leaving it up to the GPU, okay? If you set vertical sync on in the P3D menu, your CPU is going to be doing this calculation. Man, your CPU, by the way, is already burning enough, okay? You don't need to add additional stress to it by going, work out the frame rate for this and that for G-Sync as well while you're at it. You know, no, forget it. You don't need to. And you don't need to have it working out any frame rate because the GPU will do it much more better anyway. Okay? So turn it off in the sim to disable the CPU from doing it. But by setting it to unlimited anyway, to be honest, it's kind of like you're just going, P3D's going, I'll pass on this. I'm not even going to get involved in the frame rate, mate. You handle it, GPU. And the GPU's going, I got this one, mate. No worries. So that's what basically I do. And in my sim, it's smooth, man. It's smooth. Now, the only time it isn't smooth in my sim is if my CPU suddenly gets stressed. If my CPU ramps up suddenly because I've hit a lot of navigational data or a lot of vector data, or it's loading stuff in the background whilst I'm simming, then I'll get a stutter or two. You know, that very rarely happens though. Like if you have a CPU which is tuned for performance, then you shouldn't be getting that much. What you want to be able to do is load into New York City when it's pissing down with rain, and you're in a 737 or you're in a 747, you know, very technical sim plane, and you're loading in with the worst weather, okay, whatever frame rate you can achieve there, 30 FPS or 60 FPS, mate, you'll be able to get that anywhere in the world in under any weather condition, okay? Because suddenly you don't want to be flying your plane, right? And you're flying across, and then all of a sudden you hit bad weather, and it's a stutterfest. And you're like, oh, mate, turn the rain off, or turn the weather off so we can have a sim. Mate, that's not realistic. Nobody plays God like that. So if you set your sim up for the worst weather conditions, you'll achieve. Now, again, I think 30 FPS is more than enough to be able to do this in. So if I can get 30 FPS in New York, right, with rainy high weather, boom, I'm happy. Happy as Larry, because I know anywhere else in the world it will be as smooth as that, no matter what plane I'm loading in, no matter what weather I have. And that is how I work out my FPS in version 5. Never mind all this, you know. G-Sync is a proprietary adaptive sync technology developed by Nvidia, aimed primarily at people who don't know any better. It eliminates screen tearing and the need for software alternatives such as V-Sync. Well, nothing wrong. Yeah, I mean, I turn off V-Sync as well. I let the GPU set the frame rate rather than just going match it to my monitor, because at the end of the day, my monitor is 60 hertz and I can't get 60 hertz, you know, at New York in rain, you know, in P3D sitting in a 747. So, like, there's no point. So just set it for what I can achieve, and then everything else is win. But this stuff here is just asking the GPU to do more, and you're actually getting to get to see less. Anyway, guys, thank you for watching this. Don't go to websites like this, you know, typing in what is refresh rate, because it says here, one of the biggest problems for people searching for high quality monitor. That's right there is a sales speak, okay? They're trying to set up a problem for their customers that they're going to answer with G-Sync, okay? This is honestly a giant sales article. So you got to be careful. If you ask a question, right, and your answer is this is what your problem is, they're trying to sell you something, okay? So you don't need to be sold anything, okay? At the end of the day, all you need to do is achieve a frame rate in your sim that is acceptable to you. And I mean, if you want to use G-Sync to do that, then fine, but you know, you're going to be lowering your settings in order to do that. If you want to have higher scenery settings, you know, and still have a smooth experience in FLIGHTSIM, then 30 FPS will get you there. If you're using your hat switch, that is. If you're using your mouse to twizzle the camera, then yeah, you might want to set it to something a little bit higher, you know. But at the end of the day, the more higher that frame rate goes, the more you're taking away visually from your sim. Anyway, thanks for watching this, guys. Don't forget, at the end of every month, I have a giveaway where I'm giving away €50 of Sim Market vouchers for FlightSim. All you got to do is be a subscriber on my channel, put a comment down in any one of my FlightSim videos for that month, and I'll pick a winner at the end of the month. And I have chosen the winner for this month, so we're talking about the next month. Thank you for watching, guys. Take care, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.